diagonally. Now, as you go through the book, you will notice some words in bold print. And in the bold print, you'll see that these are vocabulary words. So this word was diagonally, and this teaches a lot of math and science skills. But I always kid my students at school that because they like to dap, that we call it dapagonally instead of diagonally.
Pawns must continue on their journey until they cross to the other side of the 64 square woods. If they could sneak to the other sides of the wood, they would magically be promoted into another White Queen or some other member of the household. This way they could start back to the castle and help to save the king.
I'm tough, and if I get to the other side, I get all the powers becoming another queen.
Now there are two of us. We will be hard to beat.
So we're going to talk about what happens if you can get a pawn to the other side of the board. And it's only the pawn that you can do this with. So let's go to the board and take a look. So if you somehow get your pawn all the way across the board, clear to the other end, you can promote it into another queen. And if you notice, sometimes when you get a chessboard, you might have two additional pieces. That's why you have those, because you get two extra queens. So don't just think it's a mistake, I just happen to get two extra pieces. There's a reason for that. You'll get extra queens because that's if you can get your pawn to the other side of the board, it can magically be promoted into the queen. Now, technically, you can promote it into any other piece except the king. So the pawns can be also promoted into a knight or a rook, but most people choose to use the queen. And remember, you have one queen already on the board. Technically, you could end up with 9 queens on your board if you could somehow get all 9 of your pawns to the other side of the board and get promoted into queens. I've never seen it happen, but if you could somehow do that, it is possible. So remember, if you can sneak one of your pawns, sneak, all the way across the board and get to the other side of the board, your opponent's side, then it magically gets promoted into a queen. So have fun doing that. Let's go into the next piece.
Back at the castle, Queen Ivory was discussing her problems with the 2 religious leaders that lived in the castle. They were known as the 2 bishops. They wore funny hats that had a slice in the side of them. They each lived on a different color square. One lived on a white square, and one lived on the black square. They were very old and wise. Queen Ivory felt that they could help her solve the magic puzzle spell that Queen Onyx had put on her people, causing them to freeze in their tracks. The bishop on the white square found that he could only move diagonally on the white square, but not on the black square. The bishop on the black square found that this to be true for him as well. "This is very curious," said Queen Ivory. "I noticed that the slice in your hats is the same way you can move. Maybe this is a clue to the spell. I'm just going to try it on my other court members."
So we're going to talk about the bishops, and I want to take a look at the bishops. As you can see, there's a little slice on the side of the bishop. And as you're looking at the bishop, you can see that it goes diagonally. So the cool part about that is that's a little clue to how they move. So if you're sitting at the chessboard thinking, oh, I remember the bishop, there's one on a white square, one on a black square, how did they move? Look at the piece and that'll give you a hint. It shows a diagonal line and that should help you remember which way that it moves. So let's take a look at the board and see. So you can see here, I've got a bishop on the white square and a bishop on the black square. So for instance, if I had, for some reason, a pawn right here, I could take my bishop and go diagonally across the chessboard, staying on the white squares to capture that piece. So remember, you're going to have one bishop on a white square, one bishop on a black square. And they always go diagonally.
The queen called out to her 2 end guards she called the rooks. They guarded the corners of the castle, and their hats resembled the turrets on the castle walls. They went up and down and back and forth. The queen remembered that the shape of the bishops' hats had been a clue to the way they moved. Maybe this strategy could work with the rooks. "Can you move forward?" she asked.
Yes,
they shouted.
We can move forward in a straight line as far as we want to on unoccupied squares, and we can capture any black court member of Queen Onyx's court.
In trying different directions, the rooks found that they could also move sideways, as far as they wanted to, on unoccupied squares, and capture other black pieces.
So let's take a look at the rook. You can see on this rook that he's got an X across the front of it. Trying to get an angle where you can see it. There you go. So it goes up and down and back and forth, kind of like an X. So when you're looking at your piece, remember, it can go all the way forward or it can go all the way sideways. So there's only one piece on the board that can jump over anybody. So remember, they have to have a clear shot down the board. So let's take a look at the board. So if I had a rook here, and I can go all the way down the board. So I could end up capturing that piece. Because remember, I can go all the way forward or all the way sideways. The other thing is I can go sideways. So on my next move, if I wanted to, I could go all the way down and capture that piece. What I can't do is go down the board, turn, and go down and capture that white pawn. It has to be two moves. And remember, there can be no one in front of them. They go all the way down the board and capture the piece on one move, and then they would go down and capture on the next move.
The queen was overjoyed with this information, that her idea of how each piece moved followed the design of their hats. She wanted to try it out on her horses, or as she called them, her knights. Now the knights didn't wear hats, but their heads were in the shape of a capital L. Their long, pointed noses attached to their long, graceful necks, resembling an L. The queen had taught her horses to prance in a certain order that almost looked like a dance. She called it the cha-cha dance. It went 1, 2, left or right, or 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. The Queen Ivory's horses or knights loved to dance and prance. They found that they could only move in the L pattern, but that they could go in any direction as long as they stayed in the 64 square woods. They also found out that they could only capture if they landed on a black court member at the end of their dance.
So we're going to look at the knight. And I want you to use your imagination. That's really important because remember we talked about the bishop had the slant in the side of his hat, and that helped you remember to go diagonally. We talked about that the rook had the X, which means he can go all the way forward or all the way sideways. Well, the horse, you have to use your imagination, kind of looks like the letter L. And if you can remember that, he does the special dance. He goes 1, 2, left or right, or 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. So when he's doing the special dance, he's going to go up 3 squares. 1 square, 2 squares, and then either to the left or to the right. And you can remember that an L can go any direction. It can go sideways, back and forth. So the L pattern can move. And what's cool about the rook is that really he's the piece on the board that can sneak up on you because you really don't see him coming because he moves 3 squares at the same time. And it's the only piece on the board that can do that. So let's take a look at it on the board. So if I had a piece right here, and I'm looking at my knight, I'm going to go 1, 2, cha-cha-cha, or 1, 2, left or right. And you can see that made the L pattern. So it's the only piece on the board that can actually jump over any piece. So he's going to go 1, 2. If it was on this side, he could go 1, 2, cha-cha-cha, or 1, 2, left and right. And he can make the L pattern that way as well. So they can go the L in any direction as long as they stay in the 64 square woods. So remember, 1, 2, left or right, or 1, 2, cha-cha-cha.
The queen had learned the secret to the puzzle curse for all of her court members except her husband, the king. "I must free him from the spell," she said. "He is the largest piece in the kingdom, so it is very hard for him to move around. He can't move very fast or go very far." The queen found that he could move the same way every other piece could move except the horses or knights. It seemed that the king could not do the cha-cha dance. He could move sideways, back and forth, and diagonally, but he could only move one square at a time. This made him more vulnerable to being attacked from the other castle.
The king moves only one square at a time.
Now that the queen had figured out and broken the curse, she could move her ranks and files around the woods and capture the opponents of Black Queen Onyx's court. She positioned her soldiers around the 64 square woods and began capturing the Black Queen Onyx chessmen. Her goal is to take the Black King and gain control of chess land for her husband. The white court members check back with the queen when they are about to apprehend the Black King. But he is very crafty and often escapes capture or check by either capturing one of Queen Ivory's group or moving out of the way of being attacked. The black chessmen love their king so much that sometimes one of the court members will even sacrifice themselves so he can escape.
The king cannot move to the square in line with the queen. He will still be in check. He must move out of check.
So we're going to talk about that special code word, that word check. And when you hear that word check, it has special meaning. It means they're telling you, and you have to be honest and actually tell them when you put their king into check. You say check, and you have three choices when you're the king. One choice is you can just move your king out of the way into a safer location. But remember, he can only move one square at a time. He cannot jump over anybody. He can move forward, he can go backwards, he can go diagonally, but he can only go one square at a time. So if he hears the word check, he can only move one square to get out of check. The second thing you can do if you hear the word check is that you can end up capturing the piece that has put you into check, if that's possible. The third thing you can do is you can have one of your pieces jump in front of the king and sacrifice themselves so your king will remain safe. So when you hear the word check, remember there's three things you can do. You can move out of the way, you can capture the piece that puts you into check, or what you could do is one of the pieces can jump in front and say, no, no, don't take my king, take me, and sacrifice themselves for your king. So let's see what that looks like on a board. Let's say, for example, that you have your queen right here, and she has put the black queen has put the white king into check. I said there's three things that you can do. If you had happened to have a piece up here like this piece could capture the queen and your king would be out of check. That's one option. If you didn't have it up there, you saw that the king has nowhere to move. Even if he moved here, he's still in check. So he can't move out of the way. If this space was open, he could just move out of the way. So remember, someone could capture the piece, the king could move out of the way, but if he doesn't have that option, one of these pieces could jump in front and sacrifice themselves so your king is out of check. It could have been the queen that jumped in front. So if it jumps in front and it protects the king. So remember, you have three options. You can move out of the way, you can capture the piece that puts you into check, or someone can jump in front and sacrifice themselves. Remember, you hear the word check, you think my king is in trouble. I have to get him to safety. I can either move him out of the way, I can either have someone capture the piece that put him into check, or someone can sacrifice and jump in front of him. And we're just about done. So listen to the last key word that